We are obviously live and very much happy to be here. My name is Luis Antonio Pichardo, the founder and executive director of Distill Arts. Distill Arts is a nonprofit arts mentorship organization that inspires, teaches, and hires emerging artists from underserved communities. And of course, as always, I have my lovely co-host, Abraham Jaramillo. Say what's up, Abraham.
What's up?
And today we're joined by a past contributor to our art blog zine and an amazing artist in his own right, artist Darrell Fusaro, aka Foozaro, with double O and a Z. And Darrell Fusaro, also known as Foozaro, that's Foozaro, has had a long history in the arts and entertainment industry, one of stumbling optimistically, as he has so eloquently put it in his bio, from one adventure to the next. His art has been exhibited with the iconic Andy Warhol. So that's pretty cool. And Foozaro has also created miniature effects for the blockbuster Con Air, and he was a producer of the Emmy-nominated local edition on CNN. He is author of What If Godzilla Just Wanted a Hug, leading with the heart instead of the chin, and the just released Break Out of Your Box, Be Your Heroic Self, which I actually have a copy of right here. And currently, Darrell is co hosting the internationally popular podcast, Funniest Thing, with Darrell and Ed, where he shares his unique perspective on life along with creative and practical solutions to everyday problems with his audience. He attributes his success to his mindset, which coincides with Distill Arts, develop skills and transcend limits through the arts. Through his lifetime, Foozaro has relied on art making to improve his mental health and attitude, as well as a method to overcome obstacles, solve problems, and enjoy his heart's desires. Foozaro teaches and encourages others through his workshops to experience the benefits of art making in the same way. And you can follow him on Instagram using at Foozaro at Foozaro. And his website is, you'll love this one, thiswillmakeyouhappy.com. So welcome, Darrell. Good to have you on.
It's great to be here. I am so excited you invited me. I'm so happy we bumped into each other again at the Los Angeles Festival of Books.
Mhm. Yeah. For those that might not be aware, LA Times puts together the Festival of Books every year in April to celebrate National Poetry Month, among a lot of other literary things. And yeah, it was great to have you stop by our booth. I'm really happy that we got a chance to connect. So, uh,
After I feel a little intimidated after that introduction. I hope I can measure up to it now that we're on the air.
yeah. Yeah, I
Oh,
mean,
you're
my
good.
experience, interacting with you, you definitely come across as a very happy person, my friend. So,
Well, as I like to tell people, it takes a lot of work to be this happy. But that's not to discourage anyone. I mean that in a very positive way. And that's where creativity has benefited me quite a bit because of my own devices. I am not the happiest person that you know now. But by constantly creating, doing some sort of a creative endeavor, I do something every day, whether it's planned or not. Um, I've learned to be a loving and supportive grandma to myself. Kind of, come on, Darrell, we can draw something. Oh, no, there's not enough time. I don't have the right. No, it's okay. Just scribble something. All right. And sure enough, as soon as I start putting the pen to the paper, or if it's tasked with writing something, as soon as I begin, my mood starts to elevate. Have you found that to be true?
well, I mean, speaking for myself, I can definitely say that I have had a kind of like a history of, chronic depression and whatnot. So, for sure, for me, creating, whether that was drawing or writing poetry, has always helped me kind of sort of stabilize myself, I want to say,
Yeah,
and in some ways it does make me happy. I can't
yeah,
say that it's a thing that I only do when I'm unhappy because,
right.
yeah. But yeah, Abraham, I know that you practice a lot of different types of art forms. What do you experience when you create?
Well, like you, I guess, like everybody has different modes, right? Sometimes we're sad, sometimes we're happy, and it just depends what we're feeling. And sometimes we put it aside and then save that memory or feeling and use it when creating art. Not necessarily the type of person who's like feeling something and I'll immediately go and do the art. I kind of go through the process first and then see what comes out later, way later. But well, first question I want to give you, Darrell. Sorry, just because usually one wants to address the elephant in the room, as this time is bigger, way bigger than an elephant, and it's basically this book that you have. It's What If Godzilla Just Wanted a Hug? Can you tell us a little bit about this work?
Yes. What if Godzilla just wanted a hug? That addresses two things. I'll tell you how I when I put it together, and I'll tell you probably what is that title? Is this a children's book? What if Godzilla just wanted a hug? It's not a children's. Well, it's a children's book for grown-ups, I guess I could say, but it's not a children's book. Although it does have drawings in it. Some of my illustrations are in it. Actually, an illustration with each chapter, and they're short chapters. But the title kind of says it all for me from my life experience, which is um, well, I'll just, I had a very, I mean, I had a seemingly negative childhood growing up. I grew up in New Jersey, and my mom had a problem with drinking, and she created a lot of problems. And we lived in a small town, and everybody. I mean, it was an Italian neighborhood, and I mean, just for starters, I mean, everyone I grew up with was Johnny, Louie, Frankie, Petey, Patty, Lori. Then there was Darrell. So right off, I mean, if you ever meet another Italian kid from New Jersey named Darrell, give him my condolences. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. And my mom's behavior made me feel very ashamed. That was my mom. And she left when I was 8 and my brother was 4. And then my dad, that same year, I know this is going to sound like everything, but except the fire in the orphanage, but let's just get it out of the way. Because of art, I realize I'm able to look back now and realize everything, the only thing left of my past is really a blessing. So I'm not sharing this stuff as woe is me or anything like that. Although it was very negative at the time. My grandfather was murdered and he was a union official. And we were Italian. So that was very embarrassing too, because a lot of people, well, it was like, oh, they're bad people, and there was implications at the mafia and all this stuff. And so I really had this underlying feeling that I wasn't good enough as is. And on top of it, I'm so embarrassed about everything going on in my life. So it's just so ashamed. And then my dad was trying to raise us on his own, and he got this. I know this is going to sound crazy. He got sick and died of cancer. And when I graduated high school, it was just me and my younger brother. We were orphaned. So throughout that time, my father was very aggressive, very, very aggressive, even right up until the day he died. And I've since learned that that aggressive, that anger is really a call for love. And and it's either love. I'm starting to see things as either love or a call for love. And what if Godzilla just wanted a hug? Is a giant metaphor for all of this. These things that upset us. We think we gotta fight back. Well, maybe if we just, maybe my dad just really needed someone to give him a good hug. I mean, he never really wanted one from me. But I'm just saying, like, whether it comes from God or whatever you want to believe this, and I firmly believe it, is when we come from love, everything changes for the better. But getting from where I was to where I am now, wasn't that easy. However, that's what the subtitle drives home the point before I move on is leading with the heart instead of the chin. The chin, leading with the chin, if those of you who don't know, what does that mean? There's this, when you stick out your chin and you're like, Darren, come on, hit me, man, hit me. Like, I dare you. Well, this is saying, instead of doing that, let's try bringing love into the situation and see what happens. And the book contains essays throughout my lifetime, some all, true life stories, some that, and using this new perspective, I'm shining this loving lens on everything. So it shows in each chapter some of the incidences during my childhood, then while I was on my own with my younger brother, some time in my military, and then experiences in my professional life of approaching things, even though tempted, fight or complain or cast myself as a victim. Instead, to redirect that energy and let's try approaching this with love and see what happens. So all the stories in there are examples. Even if you just got it for the titles, the titles kind of sum it up. So here's the opening chapter is, this one I have to always remember, folks. It's not what you think of me, it's not what you think of me that makes me upset. It's what I think you think of me that makes me upset. It's all in my mind. And the other chapter is my big break. It was a humble job in Hollywood. And it tells a little story about how I ended up working in Hollywood. Anything worth doing is worth doing badly. The worst thing that can happen is often the best. So it has my rotten mother was the perfect mom. And I give a little story about how, looking back, she really turned out to be the perfect mom for me. And there's a couple from when I was in the military. I was discovered on a boat in the Bering Sea. Don't let reasons slip you a roofie, especially in the creative process. Don't let that critical mind start coming in. Well, maybe you should do it like this, or maybe people will find it more attractive or might want to buy it if it has this. No, don't let reason slip you a roofie. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, it does. And I love that you managed to use, I guess, the artist in you and I think it's the most powerful tool that we have is putting ourselves in the mind of other people and portray those feelings, like you thinking of your dad's feelings, even though his actions weren't speaking what you wish it had at the time. But for you to put yourself in his shoes and understand a little bit more of where that came from, that's a great way of viewing things, as well as how life comes to the shit that throws us, basically, in things we cannot control. But the only thing that we can control is how we take them, how we use those. Either are they going to destroy us or they're going to build us up. That's the only thing we can do, right? So I love that you took that path.
Yeah, I had a lot of people who actually were there. This is another thing. I didn't automatically become understanding this way. I had to hit a lot of walls. I got into a lot of trouble through my own behavior. Okay, this is a perfect example. So in spite of all that stuff happening, I still got accepted to school for art. And I didn't have to pay tuition. because of scholarships. And however, I never resolved this feeling of not feeling good enough as is. And up until that point, what I since now can see clearly is because I never felt good enough as is, I was always abandoning myself even more because I'm trying to suss out what I think it is that will make me acceptable and well liked. You know, is it these sneakers, or is it acting this way, or is it, you know, it was exhausting. But I got accepted to art school, but because I still didn't feel good enough as is, and I didn't understand where creativity came from yet, I thought it was all just me. Meaning, I thought I was willing it into being. I was conceiving the idea, excuse me, I was conceiving the idea and I was executing it. And if I executed it just right, then everyone will love me or it'll be a masterpiece, whatever the thought is. I think it's more than everyone will love me, you know. But here's the problem. I felt like a fraud because one day and I didn't understand what was going on within me that was healthy and what was unhealthy at the time because I was still young. I was only 18, 19. One day I'd go in and we'd have class and it was almost like, holy cow, I pulled it off, you know, and the drawing would come out great in life drawing. And the teacher would say, look at what he did. Oh my goodness. And I'd get like a little mini ego high. But now I am more intimidated the next day. How am I going to replicate this? See, I had no idea that in that particular moment of creating, I was actually somehow letting go of my critical mind and allowing this higher power, this creative force that I believe comes from a higher place when I could let go of my ego and my creative and my critical mind. And I just go with the intuition at the moment and follow it without thinking, no, don't do that. Just go. Yeah. Ooh, ah, ah. And that's why it feels fraudulent at the time because it came from somewhere that's not me, but it is me. It's me tapping into something. And when I work that way, the the feeling is so incredibly good and elusive though at the same time that it doesn't matter what people think of the piece when I'm done because I'm satisfied with it. But see, I didn't know that was going on. So it became too overwhelming for me to show up every day. It was more terrifying to me. It may sound insane to some people, but it makes perfect sense to me. I was more intimidated to show up to a blank canvas in class and try to pull off creativity again on a consistent basis than I was risking my life and joining the military. Because there was something about joining the military that was okay, they'll tell me what to do, I'll just show up. And the anxiety of being creative, I wouldn't have to deal with it. And at the same time, too, I was also trying to boost my confidence, my self confidence with alcohol. You know, it would give me the elusive or the illusion, rather, that I was accomplishing things to give you that feeling of accomplishment without having to do anything. So I was using that too, and that was also making it easy for me to just withdraw from who I really was. And I joined I went through the list, you know. Marine Corps, that's a little too much. Army, the commercials looked a little dusty at the time, to be honest. Navy, when I thought of the Navy, I felt my shoulders tense up. Oh my God. The stress, the anxiety of trying to keep that uniform perfectly white. I was like, there's no way I could do it. And Air Force, and this is where you'll see how I was working against myself. Because when I thought I'll join the Air Force, I thought, I can't join the Air Force. Because by that time, my brother is a little younger than I am. And he had always looked up to me when we were younger because I was took on the role like a buffer between my dad and him. And I was even the one who taught my brother to ride his bicycle because my dad was just too aggressive and mean. And that we'd shrink it. We couldn't learn anything because he was so angry. Um, so, but and my brother was looking up to me at the time, going to art school, and I was writing him letters, but I was lying. So I thought I could never face my brother. So I joined the Coast Guard. I thought, how bad can the Coast Guard be? You know, little speedboats. At the time, Miami Vice was the cool show. So I thought, all the girls will dig me. It's suntan. That could substitute me bailing out of art school. But listen, folks, it doesn't work because wherever you go, you bring yourself. But not only that, I had no idea that there was 378-foot Coast Guard cutters that patrol the Bering Sea. That's up by Alaska, like deadliest catch stuff. So in that moment on the Bering Sea, I'm thinking, this is how how skewed my thinking was. I thought, figures. Why does this stuff keep happening to me? I couldn't see. I thought I was a victim of circumstances, but I couldn't yet see that I'm never a victim of circumstance, really. I'm like what you said in the beginning of the show. Um, I'm, I'm not a victim of circumstance, but I'm always a victim of my choices. But I couldn't see that yet. But I was going to. And then that's where I really got into. It was in that moment in the Bering Sea that I really discovered creativity for me, art drawing specifically, um, cartoons at the time transformed everything.
Yep. Before we move to that specific things, I have a question for that as well. Um, when you just went through this story, it kind of reminded me of this piece of work that you have on your website. It's called "I Was Never in My Own Corner." It has this boxer in it. It definitely depicts that kind of feeling of you giving the what basically the gratitude to yourself that you are doing great, but you can never achieve that like sustainability of saying I'm doing well. I can keep that in my mind, but we always come back to like, am I worth it? Am I doing well? I'm gonna continue this path or not? So I really love that painting. Can you tell us a little bit of that? How do you achieve that painting, first of all?
Well, first of all, I'm glad you brought that up because I was in a quandary what pictures to supply for this interview. So now we got one. So if you're watching on YouTube, you're going to see this one. Um, During COVID, I started doing something totally new that I never did. It's not anything radical by any means, but I started um, picking up discarded artwork. Like people throw out some of the most amazing um, original artwork. So I started going, you know what? Rather than try to go to the art store, it was kind of, remember, it was a little insane. We didn't know what was going on. And I just thought, okay, well, this gives me something creative, a unique way to have some fun during this time. So rather than put the pressure on myself to try to come up with some unique art, I mean, totally from scratch, I said, you know what? I'm going to start finding some old paintings. It started with a painting a friend gave me of her uncle, who was the conductor of the Santa Monica Symphony Orchestra years and years ago that she was throwing out. So I said, okay, I'm going to do something with this. So the painting you're talking about was a watercolor framed in glass that somebody put out on the side of the road. And on on its own, there's some problems with the perspective and the and the scale of certain parts of the boxer's body, specifically his hands and the gloves. And what I started doing with these old paintings was I was just drawing on top of them. I discovered my new favorite drug of choice, if that's what I call them, materials I find, because they make me feel so good. And it was, which still have been using, and I recommend them to people to experiment with, and they're called solid markers. And they're a favorite among graffiti artists here in Los Angeles because you could tag things, they're not wet. How I like them is they give a childlike crayon consistency. Man, once they dry and they dry fast, they're bulletproof. So if you're using a white one, it kind of looks like it literally looks like chalk, but it's not chalk. Like when you see it on top of something. So I was finding these old paintings, and that was one of them. And when I saw that one, I go, this one really isn't that positive of a painting. But I didn't throw it out. I mean, I said, I'm going to do something with it. So I put them in a spot where I do like my morning coffee and I could sit and I read some inspirational books and meditate a little bit. So whenever I was getting one of these paintings, I put it there so I could look at it and let it talk to me and let it tell me, inspire me, so I could get in touch with that higher part of me. And I'm looking at it and I'm looking at the face on the boxer. And I can't believe you brought that up because it reminded me of me. And I said to myself, and it's actually something you would hear. I mean, it was like it was not an uncommon East Coast. You'd hear in the neighborhood. Well, you know what? You got to be in your own corner. So it's from way back in my mind. So I thought to myself, you know what? For many years, I was never in my own corner, and that's when you get that high, like ooh, like this is God working through me because it feels so good, and it also sounds silly, like I'm going to write that on top of something that's going to look stupid, but I've learned never argue with a silly idea, and I just did it, and I'm so glad because that's my wife. Believe it or not, that one is one of my wife's favorite paintings. That's how that one came about.
Yeah, and like I love that piece is kind of the epiphany of what we're going for, like Luis's theme of this art block. It's this session is gonna be intersexuality. Hold on, please go for it. Because I'm getting it a little wrong there. Textuality, right?
Yeah,
I go for that.
right now, No, but yeah, Abraham brings up a good point. That part of what that practice is of recycling or remixing
Yeah.
artworks is in some way intertextuality when we're
Yes.
having that like conversation with other works of art or works of art that inspire us. And I really one of the things that I really remember about you specifically, Darrell, when we first had our first interactions and you submitted to Art Block many years ago, was your story about how when you were in the Coast Guard, you that was your first paid artist gig, and you were basically put in charge of creating a comic, right, for your
Yeah.
shipmates. And I think that just this sort of recurring thing that I hear in your story is that sense of sort of vulnerability and that being what ultimately sets you free. And I find that really, really important to highlight, and just to say also that I really appreciate that you speak in this way about your artwork and the things that you share with us, your audience, because I mean, like I said, for me, art has always been kind of like a way to escape too, and a way for me to overcome certain things emotionally, mentally. Um, and in a lot of other ways too, things that maybe were negative aspects of my childhood were not really something that I felt like I could deal with directly, but indirectly through art I could, and so your story definitely resonates with me in a lot of different ways, and I appreciate that. um
Well, thank you.
yeah. And yeah, like Abraham was saying, intertextuality, that is the theme of this year's issue of Art Block Zine, which is in its 8th year, believe it or not, of existence. That in itself is crazy to me. But for you, when you hear the term intertextuality, or like the conversations between art and artworks, what is it that comes to mind for you? How do you interpret that?
Well, I can't believe we're having this conversation because two people wrote. One of them, both of them, I've become friends with. One of them is Hugo Bastidas, which is he's a well-known, well-respected artist. Has a lot of his work in not just galleries but museums. And the other one is a screenwriter, scriptwriter, and novelist. He also teaches film in Poland at the Lodz Film School, Kurt Chelson. And what you were saying about the conversation, they both wrote a little something about the artwork that I was doing during COVID, which I'm still doing, although I'm doing some new things as well. And I'm still, I can't resist now when I find it a really good painting that someone discarded to go, okay, I think I could do something with this. But they were saying the same thing. They were saying that in these pieces I was doing, they were summing it up just like you said, that I'm having a conversation with the other artist, but also with the audience. And some of them are heavier. Like they all seem like they're not heavy duty looking or feeling, but when you read it or you see the drawing on top of the other, they could be almost humorous, but at the same time deep as well. So I was really, I became intertextuality is really what I was really experienced. But I've always been that way because wherever I go, I'm attracted to some art more than other arts. And I like the art that it inspires me to do two things. It challenges me, one, to it challenges me and encourages me. That's the kind of art I like, meaning it challenges me because I'm seeing something here that I wish that I admire, that I admire. So it challenges me to step up my game, but it also encourages me because the artwork is also saying, someone else did this, you could do your thing too. Art has always been encouraging. A while back, I not too long ago through Los Angeles Public Library, I get asked through LA Made to do workshops. And one of the workshops I do, I can't believe they okayed this. Are you ready for the title of this one? Yeah, I threw it out there because it's something I really wanted to do, and I did it with young kids by accident, special ed kids. And the title of the workshop is "Let Go and Have Fun at Fart Camp," because the whole class is about not taking yourself so seriously that you can't, because that's the big stumbling block. We all want to make good stuff, But then that could be the problem. So in order to make good stuff, you got to not take yourself too seriously.
Yeah.
It really is a quandary, but it's a great quandary. And in that, I realized when I was teaching them, I jotted this down so I'd remember for the interview. I realized that art cures, like heals. Art enlightens. Art illustrates. Art teaches, inspires, and entertains. And when I see art, most art does that for me. My favorite art, if that's going to be a follow-up question, or the art that I find that really motivates me, the most inspiring is children's art. I wish I could draw like that again. If I mean, it's like, how did I get taught out of that? Because if you look at, I'm talking children's art before they get to being taught how to draw in elementary school, because it's almost like they naturally pick out the right color combinations, and these crude drawings have so much feeling in them, and they're in the right place on the paper, like they're composed perfectly, or they're off just enough to make it brilliant. I mean, that is my number one inspiration. Second inspiring art by grown-ups would be children's book illustrators, especially the ones from the mid-century, from like the 40s, 50s, 60s. Amazing stuff, because it's so simple and yet sophisticated at the same time, that when I accidentally pull something off that's simple and I feel it's as strong as that, I'm like, oh my God. And I'm like so excited. And then I go into, like I said earlier, oh no, I'm not going to be able, how did I do that? Am I going to be able to pull anything like that off again? Yes, you will.
That's really interesting to hear that it's children's artwork that inspires you the most. And I think what you're describing, at least how I'm interpreting it, is the lack of inhibition, right? Because
Yes.
it is really
Yes.
unfortunate, that kids at some point are told that their work is not good anymore and they need to somehow improve upon it. And I feel like that happens to a lot of us, that as we get older, we develop that imposter syndrome that you were talking about before, where we feel like I'm never really going to be a real artist or whatever. Um, I mean, your journey is definitely outlined, I think, pretty well in this one, and also in what you were reading earlier. How, and I don't want to like rehash what you've already written before, but how is that like? How is it, or better said, what is the process that you are allowing yourself to partake in order to lose those inhibitions now?
Okay. This is a good question. Um, okay. Just this morning. Okay. I can tell you something from just this morning. So, like I mentioned briefly before, in the morning when I was describing the painting, I was never in my own corner. I get up, and like I meant, I'm not, like I said, it takes a lot of work. It is happy, but it's well worth the effort. Um, I wake up a grumbler, rah, 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 rah. Concerns, worries I shouldn't even be worried about. And, I just treat myself like a loving grandma. Don't worry, Darrell, we're going to have our coffee. We're going to sit on the couch. Everything's going to get better, because I'm going to I read from some inspirational readers. These are books anyone can get. You find them anywhere. They have a little reading for the day and a positive quote. Some are spiritual. Some come from, Catholicism or some other Christian, only because that's, what I was raised in. So It's easy for me to digest, and I pull out the stuff that wakes up my mind and makes me feel confident, which just means with faith, you know. I love the definition of faith, joyful expectancy. I never knew that was the definition of faith. It's so pleasant. But I wake up an hour before my wife. She doesn't wake up a grumpy. She wakes up like Snow White in the Enchanted Forest. You know, it's crazy. She's like happy when she wakes. But this way, by the time she wakes up, I'm a reasonably nice husband. Putting all that aside, while I'm doing my morning routine, is what I call it, so it doesn't sound too holy. You know, it's just a routine I've gotten into. I keep a pad handy. And that's another thing I want to stress for anyone who's listening to this, who may have not been creative in a while or getting back into it. Don't make it a big deal. Most of my best stuff I've drawn has happened while I'm sitting on the couch with just a regular art pad. Just like I got pages from an art pad, but just a regular art pad. And I keep pens on the coffee table. This is a little collage. This actually is in the book you have, but this is the original. This was done, this little collage you can. This was just done, well, after my morning routine. I also keep like some magazines on the coffee table that I could tear up. And I just allow myself to do whatever, to play. But this is out because I'm actually going to frame this for, my work is hanging in a shop in Burbank right now. So this is going to be in there. So you never know what this can lead to when you create this way. But what I'm trying to say is I just pull out the pad, even when I'm thinking, oh, I feel good enough. I don't need to draw anything right now. But I encourage myself. I go, no, just pull out the pad and just have fun. It doesn't even have to be good. And every time I take that approach, and instead of going, well, no, I got to wait till I'm in my art studio or have my pens or my certain paper, throw all that out the window. This morning, this show you how absurd. This morning, I was excited for this interview, so I was feeling really good. And I had some other things I needed to take care of that I felt good about. So the necessity to draw, you know, wasn't really there. I already felt great, you know. I had nothing pressing to draw. But when I got done, a little voice said, well, why don't you draw something? No, I'm going to shower. But now I don't argue with that voice because that little voice is the real us. Meaning that little voice is my true self. The one that says, no, we don't have time for that. That's almost like the bad parent I've been to myself. It's almost like the child in me has to come out. So there's this, someone threw out an art book, you know, just of this guy's artwork that's really odd. I mean, I changed the cover. I made this piece of meat that was a sculpture of his. I turned it into a face. My friend's name is Steven, but his mom calls him Stevers. And we always make fun. He's half Polish and half Mexican. So, I mean, literally, his parents are from Poland, his dad's from Poland, born in Poland. And his mother is Mexican, born in Mexico. So he's a Polish Mexican. But me and my friends, we all refer to him as the pink Mexican. Because he has just the right amount of Polish, you know, to make him look more pink than, you know, olive skin. So he got upset. He said, my head just looks like a piece of meat, like a ham. So I made a fake book cover out of it. I'm just a piece of meat by Stevers. But this is just being playful. And then I opened it up and I just started playing. I just started drawing these heads. And I didn't know where this is going. But you know what? I'm having fun. And your audience might be looking at it and go, what is this weirdo? But I feel so good about this drawing because in the moment, I just let creative take over. So it's got, if you're listening, it's got a series of a man's head, like a film strip from the top floating down to the bottom with different expressions. And then it has the original artist's work in the book. You know, he's got some lawn chairs here. And on the other side, just some random color collage. So on the one page, the page preceding the heads floating down, which is on the right page when you open up the book, on the left side, it says, keep Joe moving. And Joe referring as a big cup of coffee. And I got such a high. Like, this is the thing. It doesn't matter anymore. Is this going to be acceptable? Am I going to frame this? Are anybody else going to like it? And even showing it to you now, I've finally gotten to the place where I don't care if you guys love this or not, because I felt so good making it. I still feel really good about it. I don't even know how good it looks on camera, but who cares? And that's the place. I mean, that's how I have to do it. And the other day, I'll send you this one. Just yesterday, I something came into my head. I had leftover metallic a sheet of almost mirror-like metallic, um, you know, adhesive type of paper. I mean, it's beautiful. It looks like a real mirror, and you can clip it, cut it. It's like a silver foil, and you can stick it to things. I mean, I don't really know what people do with this, but you can use it for anything really to decorate something. So I was playing around the studio. I got it right here, so I'm going to hold it up. So I thought, holy cow, I'm going to do a 21st century self portrait. So the idea was cut the metallic in the shape of a smartphone. And then I drew it and I said, this is a 21st century self portrait. So that's why it has the hashtag Foozaro.
Yeah. Wow.
Anyone looking, it's very simple, folks. And this is done once again. If you want to go buy they're manufactured by a company called Secura, the solid marker.
Yeah.
So I'm excited. I love this one, and I don't care if anyone else loves it, because part of my mind will say it's too simple. There's nothing there. But there's the healthier part of me goes, I don't know. I just love the way this feels, and the fact that the viewer can walk in front of this, and it is pretty reflective. Let's see.
Yeah. Yeah. It actually looks a lot like a silver foil almost.
It's like a silver foil, and you can get this anywhere. I'm sure you can probably get it at Michael's. I just happen to have it in my studio. The idea came. Part of my brain said, "Oh, that's silly. That's contrived." But I have to push those thoughts out of the way because the initial thought to do it felt good. And those other thoughts felt bad. And that's what we got to remember. Those bad feeling thoughts don't mean I should listen to them. Those bad feeling thoughts mean don't listen to them. Listen to the good. So now I don't even have to send you this because we got to see it here.
That was really cool. I think that I mean, just by looking at it and experiencing it, even just through the screen, I can totally feel what you were thinking as you were creating that. It's a kind of a fascinating feeling to be able to experience something remotely in this way and still see the levels of it might be simple, in its
Right.
execution, but it's so complex in its overall message. You're the title of it being the 21st century selfie or self-portrait,
Yeah.
which is essentially a selfie now, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so you have sort of this like communication between concepts of what a self-portrait used to be versus what a self-portrait is now, and the fact that it's a smartphone shaped reflective surface in a hand,
Yeah.
that as an audience member you could potentially walk up to it and experience exactly what it's attempting to convey, you know? I mean, that's like intertextuality all over the place, you know? And I love the fact that you are in a lot of ways saying, you know, these ideas of it not being good or whatever, if it being too simplistic, those are bad ideas. You know, I think you're
Yeah.
so correct in that, because any person that looks at it and analyzes it can totally see the complexity of it, you know. Yes, it's fun and it's entertaining, but I mean, damn, Daryl, you really knocked that one out the park, I have to say.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Well, that's the best compliment ever because I mean, I may be misquoting here, but I'm pretty sure it was Leonardo da Vinci who said, simplicity is the height of sophistication. And I know Miles Davis said, pretty sure it was Miles Davis. I could be wrong with this too. Well, if I'm wrong, you could leave a comment. I think it was Miles Davis. It might not have been who said, anyone can make something complicated. It takes a real artist to simplify. So
Mhm.
you saying that is the best compliment you could give me. So thank you.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's I don't know, maybe it's more like an intuition sort of thing, you know, like me
Yes,
as a
yeah.
practicing artist, you know, I'm able to sort of see what you're getting at there. Um, but it could also just be that, you know, your lack of inhibitions are what are coming through, you know, in the artwork. And so uh I don't know, man. I think that you're onto something here, you know, and your happiness and the way you present yourself to the world. I think that it comes across as also genuine and uninhibited, and that again, you know, goes back to this idea of, you know, allowing yourself to be vulnerable and allowing yourself as an artist to just be, you know, which I definitely admire. I think that that's a great way for all of us to try and approach our own practices and even our life in general.
Yeah, yes, yeah. Yeah, I mean, because like I said, in my early years, and I don't know where I got that lie, I'm not good enough as is, it can still creep in there, like almost like, you show up somewhere. Most of the time, I would show up anywhere and I would think, you know, whatever it takes to be here, I ain't got it. You know what I mean? I would look around and go, I ain't got it to be here. They all know what they're doing. But now I realize, no one knows what they're doing. In a good way, in a good way. I mean, no one is 100% confident. So you can let your guard down, which is what you're saying. And the amazing thing is, when you're vulnerable, you not only are you good enough as is, you feel okay, but you become more attractive. You get what it is, the opposite of what you've been protecting yourself from, like thinking I better do this so I'm accepted. Now you're finding, wait a minute, if I become vulnerable, now I'm more attractive. I mean, it's incredible. It's one of the best discoveries to make in your life.
Yeah.
Yeah, the part of your journey kind of reminds me of a poem that I wrote, and this is just a part of it. It says, I don't know about you, but I don't want to be held in a cage. Academia structure and expectations stay away from my page. Kind of remind me of what you just said, because it's just the worrying about like the right thing to do, the best way something can look like, and you stop trying to approach it in different ways that are more honorable, and the way you feel, and the way that it's actually meant for you to do it. And I like that. But because we already skimmed through this, I kind of wanted to actually go for the story, because we didn't go for your titles. And one of the titles that you have is Shipboard Artist. Can you give us a little bit of it on that story? It's part of your podcast as well. I think the first episode.
Wait, what was it? The shipboard? When I was on the
Shipboard
ship?
Artist. It's basically the comic gig that you got when you joined the Navy. Can you
Oh,
give
Coast
us a
Guard.
little bit of that story?
Yeah. Okay. So it was. I was discovered. Yeah, where is that one? I got it. Hang on. I was discovered on a boat in the Bering Sea. So what happened was I ended up on a 300 after joining. Shortly after, I was stationed in Hawaii, but from Hawaii, I drew the shortest straw and ended up going on 378-foot Coast Guard cutter to Alaska, to the Bering Sea. And as we were pulling out of Hawaii, I was thinking, oh God, this is going to be a nightmare. I'm not like, I'm not really, I didn't have a lifetime aspiration to join the Coast Guard. I mean, it wasn't even on my radar until I was looking, like you heard, way to, I don't know, just escape. But I knew I was in over my head, but I was smart enough, or I had the inclination to bring a big block. Someone threw out a big block of heavy duty paper and just simple markers, felt tip markers, black and assorted colors with me on the ship. And when we got out to sea and I got adjusted, we had round the clock. I mean, you work round the clock when you're on a ship. And this is before cell phones. So the only entertainment once you got off duty after working your 8 hours, after your 8 hours of regular work, then you either had a watch where you're watching, you're helming the ship, which means steering it. So you're always doing something in a little bit of time that you're not on watch, or you're not working. There's nothing to do but play checkers, or, there's no TV. There was, like I said, there was no satellite, nothing. And occasionally they would have a movie, but the movie was like still on the old film projector, like they would have in my elementary school back in the 60s. But it was just, that was the time. We didn't even have VHS on the ship. Isn't that crazy? Because this was the 80s, the early 80s. So I was like, what am I going to do? I started drawing cartoons about about the experience that I was having, how out of my league I was on this ship. I mean, most of these men and women, they were cut out for this stuff. But so I started drawing when I would have my spare time. I started drawing these cartoons, and they made me feel good. And they made me feel good about admitting my vulnerability. I'm in over my head. But they weren't always like shining the best light on what was going on the ship day to day. And on one of these particular, after I had like a bunch of them, probably about 6 or 7, I started sharing them with some of the guys that I was close to. And one of them said, why don't you show, because he had been on this ship for some time. I was just brand new. Some of these, men and women had been on it for like 6 months, a year already, And he said, why don't you share it with the captain? I'm going, you sure I should share this with the captain? And he goes, yeah, man, he'll love them, So I got the courage. I said, all right, why not? I got nothing to lose. I showed the captain what I was drawing. And he loved them. He loved them. And he said, okay, great. In addition to what you're doing, I want you to draw a cartoon every night. Are you willing to do that? I said, yeah. And he gave me, we had a marine safety, because I was just drawing these in the galley when no one was there. That's the cafeteria. The galley is the cafeteria of a ship. So no one's in there after hours. So I would draw sitting at one of those tables. So on the highest part of the ship, we had this marine safety office where a scientist, one of the Coast Guardmen was the job is as a oceanic science person who checks the water for contaminants, all it says we're doing our thing, various studies going on. But in there was a giant drafting area. The captain gave me permission to be up there with the marine safety officer. So me and him shared this office. I'm drawing cartoons. He's doing his experiments. We became very close. So now I'm doing these cartoons every week, and they're being hung in the main pass outside the galley every morning. And I started to become like, Mick Jagger. Like people would be so excited to see what the next cartoon was going to be. And this went on for a couple of weeks. Now, mind you, I'm still doing my other jobs. I mean, I'm still like painting. I'm still standing watch. I'm still, doing everything, a sailor does when you're underway. Plus, we're doing search and rescue. We're boarding ships. So we had things happening. It was during the Cold War, so we're watching for Soviet spy vessels. We did drug I don't know, we arrested drug smugglers. So we had that stuff going on. But I'm drawing these cartoons for a minute. About another 3 weeks later, I get called into the captain. Captain wants to see you. I'm thinking, did I do something? Did I draw something you might not have liked? So I'll explain. I should share what it is. Okay. The one that you're going to show on YouTube, so in case you're listening to this on the podcast, I drew this. We had a ship's suggestion box in the galley, the cafeteria. And I'm looking at this thing. I'm thinking, does anybody really, who's really, we're going to, like, we're the military. Are they really taking our complaints? You know what I mean? Seriously? Because everyone's grumbling. It's the military. Everyone's grumbling. And I never saw anyone use it. But the idea came, it's mounted on the wall of the ship, the bulkhead of the ship, in the galley. And I started thinking about this, and I go, I wonder if this is the case. So I drew a cartoon, and it shows a sailor, the Coast Guardsman. He's so excited. He has his little suggestion. He's dropping it in the suggestion box. And now the rest of the cartoon, it was a vertical cartoon, like portrait style, is the ship from the outside, giant Coast Guard cutter. But I did cutouts, like you could see with X-ray vision through the ship, and from the suggestion box is a pipe where the suggestion really goes. And it makes its way traversing through all the decks of the ship, and you see this little mail slot that no one knew was there on the side of the ship just above the waterline, and you see the suggestion just go out of the ship into the ocean, and there's two fish there looking at it like, that's odd. So they called me in, and I'm thinking, so that's the style of these cartoons I was doing. I mean, they weren't like, pro Coast Guard. They were funny. This stuff happened. This is what we think happens, or what we think is going on, or what we're doing, and the blunders. But anyway, he calls me in, and my chief is there. And now a chief, when you're in the military and you're enlisted, your chief is like your manager. So he's like, my immediate report is my chief. My chief is there. I'm like, uh-oh. And the captain says, hey, Chief so-and-so was talking to me, and we've come up with a plan we'd like you to consider and execute. I said, okay, what is it? What it was they wanted me to paint like mural style over the different doors, with throughout the ship, mini murals that reflected what department was behind that door. These big doors, hatches, they're called, big steel hatches. So I started, for the ship has a little storekeeper where you buy your gum, cigarettes, and stuff like that. There's also a little mini hospital. We had so I started doing this. So now the captain took me off all the jobs that I didn't really love doing. And now my daytime job is doing what I love. And in my style. They didn't say, hey, we want you to do it like this. They just said, no, what are you doing? So I painted for the rest of the tour, the 76 days. I did the doors, I did my cartoons, and I even got mentioned in the a little joke, mind you, in the plan of the day, which is the orders of the day that goes up on our last day heading back to Hawaii. It said, and a special thanks to Darrell, the door painter Fusaro, for enhancing all our hatches. And then at the end it said, and thank God the Coast Guard doesn't pay by the hour. Because the joke was that I was milking it until we got back to Hawaii, which I really wasn't. But that was like their big. I think they were just humoring me. But that's the story behind that. Was discovered on a boat in the Bering Sea, and I was thinking, this is how magical it is when you do the thing you love. This is the moral of that story for myself and for anyone else. If you do the thing you love, either through necessity because it makes you feel better about yourself, like I was doing those cartoons at the beginning, but just doing it for yourself, like you, the audience, for yourself, please, helping yourself be yourself through just creating for yourself and not being inhibited. Well, then it becomes attractive to others. And it led to there is no way, there's not a job title in the Coast Guard. There's not a job in the Coast Guard, artist, muralist. But I leave art school because I feel like I'm not good enough. I joined the military. I'm as far away as anyone could be from, quote unquote, pursuing their passion. But because the passion never leaves us, if you're a creative person, I was still doing it anyway with just markers and paper. And doing it created more, it attracted. It's almost like that saying, when you make a gratitude list, making a gratitude list for the things you already have in your life that you're grateful for is actually not just a thing to do to elevate your mood. It is a magnetic, it activates a magnetic force that brings into your life more things to be grateful for. I mean, I literally was being paid specifically as an artist in the Coast Guard when that job description doesn't even exist. That's the mind-blowing thing. And this happens all the time for many people who just do this because it's their passion.
Yeah, amen to that, man. Yeah, and I think I said it on our first episode of the Art Block podcast. A poet is gonna poet, an artist is gonna art. No matter what, if it really resides inside of you, it's going to manifest itself. And that's why I really love that story. Like I said, that's actually I think one of the first stories that you submitted to Art Block Zine, and that was essentially my introduction to you and your work. So,
Interesting.
yeah.
For me, it was because before this I checked your podcast, which is hold on, the funniest thing, and that's where I heard that story, which goes back to the question, like, how do you guys end up doing this podcast, you and your co-host, and what have you learned through this process of podcasting?
Okay, that's a great question. When I got laid off from, I was working for Time Warner. I was producing a show called Local Edition. This was back when CNN had another station called Headline News, and maybe before your time, or maybe some people who are listening can remember. Headline News was a station. It was a subsidy of CNN. But instead of long form news, it was repetitive, short, bite-sized, like 5-minute segments of news, and it would repeat, throughout the day. So it was the thought was you could tune in anytime, get updated what's going on in the world and in your area, and you're done. In and out. Anytime you could, and things would get updated, but most of the time it was, current things just being repeated, not stretched out. And one of the shows was called Local Edition, and it was wherever Headline News Channel was, they also had local news thrown in. So here in Los Angeles, we weren't seeing local news from Atlanta unless it was national news from Atlanta, unless it was something spectacular. But the local politicians and people in Los Angeles, they're not going to be interested in local politics of Atlanta. They're interested in local politics in Los Angeles. So Local Edition was small 5-minute interviews, sometimes 10, of local politicians, artists, actresses, authors, just here in Los Angeles. And in 2012, Headline News was no longer going to be the way it was. They were getting rid of the whole shebang. So I was one of the people who was being let go. But my whole department was. But here's the thing. Just 6 months before that, I was telling the guy who was my mentor at the time, who I met many years ago in Hawaii. His name was Mike Dugan. He's since passed away. But ironically, I met this guy in Hawaii. He's a Canadian, and he is actually interred here at Our Lady of Angels Cathedral. He's right here next to me, his tomb. So it's crazy. Who knew I was going to end up here and he was going to end up here? But anyway, that's neither here nor there, except for another little wow, which gets to the title of the show, Funniest Thing. I get laid off. He goes, what are you going to do now? Two things. I started writing the book, What If Godzilla Just Wanted a Hug? Because they gave me a year of severance pay, which was fantastic. So I had a year, so I was doing that. And out of the blue, Mike says, you'd be good on radio. That's like telling someone, yeah, you'd be a great actor, a movie star. It's like, how do you go from here to there? And I was thinking about it, and I turned it over. I said, yeah, that's nice. And I took it to heart, but not really too much to heart. And I meditated on it over the weekend. And then on Monday, I knew of a radio station. This was just when podcasts were starting. And I was thinking, out of Missouri. I go, I wonder if they have something going on that, we could air this, do a radio show. I'm still not even sure what the title would be or anything. And they did. And you could submit. And the last day for submissions to be considered was that day, Monday. So I called Mike. I go, yeah, I'm thinking about submitting. It was Unity Online Radio, it was called. I said, what am I going to call this show? Just call it Funniest Thing. I said, really? He goes, yeah, because every time something happens, you always call me up and go, funniest thing. You're not going to believe it. Just like him ending up being interred right here. So, and he became like the father I never had, because I met him, I was early 20s, and he would have been my father's age when we met serendipitously while I was in the Coast Guard. So we started doing it, and the theme was, whenever we step out boldly, we always experience better than expected outcomes, stepping out with faith. And we did a weekly, we've been doing a weekly podcast now since 2015, 10 years. We took 2 years off. Not during COVID. We actually started up again during COVID. We took 2 years off before COVID just to regroup. And things were changing. And now we're doing it. We've been doing it on our own now, without Unity. We're not affiliated with any station. And it's grown. And we basically share, it's not much different than what you guys talk about, except it's not always dedicated to creativity or the arts. But it is all about, taking a healthier, optimistic approach, and how, also not just an optimistic approach, but also considering the fact that, when you act morally and ethically, things seem to work out really well. And when you don't, things don't work out very well. So we tie that in with spirituality. We don't shy away from that either. And and that's our show. And it's actually grown and grown and grown. And we've had some celebrities, we've had some ordinary people, we've had some politicians on, we've had some ministers, we've had people from other religions. We had you know uh, what do you call him? The laughing yogi, who's belongs to one of those, I can't remember the exact religion, but we have all these different people come on. And it's not a religious program, but it definitely is it's all about, really, you could sum it up with saying it's positive psychology mixed with spirituality, and how this could really benefit, how through our examples and the stories we tell, we kind of see that. I believe my life is really two things. If I remember this, my life, and this motivates me to be a better person, that my life is my ministry, meaning wherever I go, I'm an example, and how I affect people around me, that's your ministry. So being mindful of that, I really don't want to affect people badly. Don't get me wrong. A lot of times, I don't always think the best things of others, but by keeping weight, your life is your ministry, Darrell. And I'm not even talking like whatever ministry, whatever that means to you in a healthy sense. I'm not proselytizing to anyone. I just mean in my behavior and my manner. And my life is my laboratory, meaning, look, be aware of how what you put out brings about, meaning the things you say, things you do, be mindful to see what comes back, and you'll see what works best for you. Unless you're in denial, you don't want to believe, wait a minute, because it's true. When we think and behave a certain way, it's the cause, and then we're always going to get a reaction. And the reaction, the good news is, the reaction I have found for 37 years of being mindful of plants, I have found what comes back is exactly what I put out. And it may not come back from the person I'm giving it to at the moment, but it's going to come back. So if I'm pleasant to someone here and they might be a little rude or still upset or ignore it or whatever, that doesn't bother me, because it's going to come back to me from somewhere else. But I guarantee you, when I'm rude or belligerent or selfish, anyone in any respect, well, someone's going to treat me that way where I don't want them to treat me that way. So we really are living in an amazing universe where what we give, we receive. Uh,
Yeah.
and that's why I like meeting you, Luis, because right off the bat, I could feel that's what you were all about. Because you really have a generous spirit in all that you do. And I remember the very first time I met you, I felt, wow, this guy and what he's doing, this is a great person. That's why I was so flattered when you invited me to participate with Art Block Zine. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, but yeah, I definitely appreciate everything that you're saying and, sharing with us, because yeah, I think that that's something that we are sort of missing out on, in a more popular cultural sense. There's too many things that are pulling us apart, and I think that it's really important that we try to really do what we can to bring everyone back together, to sort of remember that we're all just human and that we all
Yeah.
share in some of these basic human experiences. So I really, like I said, I really admire you, Daryl, and I really appreciate all of your storytelling that you share with us in so many different ways. And not to have the podcast go on too long, right? You shared with us about the podcast, and gave us, I think, a pretty good sense of what we would expect to hear. But are there other places on the web or other ways in which people can connect and hear your stories that you feel would be easy enough for people to access?
Yeah, right now the best place to hear anything or see anything I do, you mentioned at the top of the show, is really, I'm on Instagram primarily. That's my only social media, which is at Foozaro. My website, I try my best to update it so you know where I'm giving workshops and what's going on, and that's thiswillmakeyouhappy.com. I couldn't believe nobody took that website name.
Yeah, I'm
It's like
actually pretty surprised about that too.
when I typed it in, I thought this is no one. So yeah, thiswillmakeyouhappy.com. And if you're interested, our podcast, which you could listen to or watch on YouTube, is Funniest Thing with Darrell and Ed. So if you type in funniest thing with an exclamation point in whether you're on Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts or even on Google, it'll pop up.
Awesome. Well, I'm definitely gonna have to check out your podcast and listen to it more. Um, any final questions, Abraham? Any last things you want to add?
Well, I hold on. I have one. Because again, I had a couple of pieces that I checked, and I found this one curious, since it's good for you to share more pieces of art and make please more editing.
Trying to add to my
So
work.
can you tell us a little bit about? And sorry, I'm gonna kill the name of this one, but that's kind of one of the reasons I also liked the Chat du Mus. It's a painting with a blue frame with I think it's a cat or a dog. I'm not sure 100%, but I found it really interesting.
And what do you know the title?
It's Le Chat de Mus.
Oh, yes. I can't even pronounce that either. It's in French.
Yeah,
It's the cat. It's the cat in the museum.
yes.
The cat in the museum. Yes. Okay. For your audience listening, and I'll make sure you get this image, Louise, for the YouTube. It's an image of a cat sleeping in a painting of a painting. This was one of those found pieces. The painting was a found, unframed piece of an impressionist style bouquet of flowers, like a still life. And I, for some reason, thought this would look good in one of those elaborate gold gilded frames like you would see at a museum. And for some reason, it I just saw a cat sleeping in the image. So I thought, I'm going to draw a sleeping cat, like peacefully sleeping, over the painting of the flowers. And it's not done to look like it looks like it's not done to look like the cat is an actual cat in the painting with the flowers on the table. It's just, I just draw over the background as if it's just a mass of colors and now a cat's on top. But it works the way it is, of the cat sleeping on this impressionistic painting, but he's obviously drawn in my semi-cartoon illustration style. So it's a contemporary drawing on top of someone's attempt of a impressionist painting. And then the gold, I found one of those old, like, elaborate frames, and I spray painted that with. I found a beautiful blue. I mean, thanks to graffiti, they got the best spray paints now. So I found this beautiful matte blue. It's just incredible color. and it's a graffiti brand paint. I can't remember the name, but I painted the gold gilt frame with this blue, which enhanced this impressionistic painting inside. And then the cat was drawn on top of that. And it's almost because the painting has the feeling of, like I said, an impressionist painting from that time, almost like Monet style, but it's not. And with the elaborate frame that's actually been painted over with this color, but you can see it's one of those elaborate frames. And then the cat on top. And I thought, well, this whole thing altogether represents a cat in the museum. I don't know if that's getting in there, but when you see it, and it actually sold, I mean, that sold it, went to someone who really fell in love with that piece, who lives in Los Angeles. But the elaborate frame, all the parts fit together to just make this almost humorous nod to museum art, to fine art, to cat, almost, and a little bit like surrealistic, the surrealistic idea. Like a good example is Rene Magritte. He did a painting of a pipe, and it says, "This is not a pipe," because it's not a pipe; it's a painting of a pipe. So this is a cat in the museum.
Excellent. Love it.
And that's why I made the title in French, because it kind of adds that, that element of, yes, of course, this is a museum piece.
That chef's kiss.
Yeah, it gives it the chef's kiss at the end.
Yeah. I dig that. All right. Well, yeah, I think this has been a great conversation. Thank you, Darrell. Thank you for sharing so much about yourself and your inspirations. And you know, all we can hope is that as people continue to listen to our podcast and watch the YouTube version of it, that people will walk away inspired. And I know I every time I talk to you, especially about your artwork and stuff like that, I have always walked away feeling inspired and just happy. You have that infectious optimism about you that I very much appreciate. So
Thank you.
yeah, thank you, Darrell. Everybody that's listening or watching along, make sure that you do follow Darrell at Foozaro on Instagram and thiswillmakeyouhappy.com, which great website. So yeah, thank you again. And I think with that we'll call it an episode. So peace out, everybody.
Thank you.